So today we're talking about the power of positioning, and my guest is the man, David C. Baker. For anyone who is listening and watching and may not know everything that David's done in his career, he's an author, speaker, advisor to entrepreneurial creatives worldwide. He's written 5 books, advised over 900 firms, and keynoted conferences in 30 countries. His work's been covered in dozens of international publications, and his latest work, which is a book that I absolutely loved, is called The Business of Expertise: How Entrepreneurial Experts Convert Insight to Impact and Wealth. And you can check that out at expertise.is. David, thank you so much for joining me on Thrive today.
Sure, it's really good to be here. I had to move a couple of these because of a crazy travel schedule, so I'm glad it worked out. I've been looking forward to chatting with you and your audience.
Absolutely. So today we're talking all about, I think, our mutual favorite topic, which is determining market position. And for all of the creative agency owners listening, why is it so imperative that we niche down and stop being all things to all people?
I think it's important now. I don't think it was all that important in the past, but the world has changed around us radically and quickly. And while, I guess we could just say the world has been Googleized, right? So now we have access to all the prospects out there that we want, or at least a much larger universe. But our competitors have access to the people that we used to work with, and we were protected geographically, and we're not. The world's expectation around information and expertise is so specific. You could be lying in bed dreaming about one very specific thing, and for a minute you might think, oh, this is such an esoteric question I have. How in the world would I find somebody that knows exactly what I need and could give me the information free and could give me the information immediately? And then you realize, oh, there's this thing called YouTube or Google or whatever. And so that's why, because nobody wants to pay for the wise person anymore. They want to pay for deep expertise, and they're comfortable assembling this litany of experts and picking and choosing and then coming up with a plan on their own. So unless we're niched that way, we're just not going to have a very compelling answer in the marketplace.
So you probably love the term full service digital agency as much as I do.
Yeah, right. Yeah, full service simply means, hey, I am, I'm desperate and give me a chance. I wrote an article one time for Communication Arts years ago, and I was in kind of a punchy mood, and I knew the editor pretty well, and so I added 2 paragraphs onto the article, and I knew she would recognize it as a joke and axe them, and we'd have a good laugh over it. But she didn't. She actually thought that was a part of the article.
Oh,
and what
God.
I said in the article at the end was, like, prostitutes are better at running their businesses than creatives, because the only people who, when they say full service, mean it are really prostitutes. And the rest of the people just mean, give me a chance. Like, I'll do it. I'll figure it out. So, yeah, I don't like that term at all.
Well, I was looking forward to a lively conversation. You've already not disappointed in the first 3 minutes.
Right.
So let's talk about this for a second. In terms of translating positioning to all the touch points where we might interact with our prospects, you say, craft your positioning entirely on your strategy and not your execution. Don't even feature it on your website because it's interchangeable. This is like a huge pain point in the creative world. Everybody has this Chinese menu of services on their website. What's going on?
Maybe it's because that's where all their training comes from, right? Very, very few of them had any classes on strategy or research and insights or account planning. Almost all of their work was related to a particular craft, which we now see as largely implementation. And to move upstream, we have to attach that implementation to strategy. Otherwise, we're so far downstream and somebody else has made all those decisions, and we're simply there with a compressed time frame and not much budget left to be the hands people rather than the mind people. And so I think it's really tough. Like, if you think about somebody who is a fantastic coder or an app developer or something like that, they need specific requirements and instructions and guidelines, but they but they can be really, really good regardless of what the strategy of the project is. And that's
Mm-hmm.
what I mean by it being really interchangeable. And so I believe that implementation is something that most clients want and value, but they're not going to pay a premium for it
That's
unless
right.
it's attached to a really tight positioning.
Yeah, and the other thing that I think of when I look at these websites that have the Chinese menu drop down, it's almost like, having the client self-prescribe their own solution and then simply search out a commodity to get it done.
Right, right. Which would be called malpractice in a professional service
That's
setting,
right.
where you don't go to a doctor anymore. You go to the pharmacy and say, "Hey, I know what's wrong with me. Just this is what I need. Do it." And that's self-prescribing, and it's unethical. It's immoral. But we allow our clients to do that sometimes because we're well, we don't feel like we can push back. We view these client relationships as sometimes a little bit fragile and have to be handled carefully. And if we push back too much, they'll go to somebody else. We're left with this powerless positioning that doesn't allow us to have the sort of impact and to make the sort of money that we could.
Right. Well, actually, that's a great segue to one of the other things I wanted to talk about, which is one of my favorite credos in the book is for agency leaders to drop the irrational fear that to keep a client, you have to meet all of their needs.
Right.
And I'm thinking about, do you think that irrational fear stems from insecurity alone? And how can they move past that if that's the case?
Mm. I think it probably is insecurity. I'm not absolutely sure. I know that would be the case for me. I'm thinking back to my dating life. Actually, I've been married 38 years, and I remember how I was just self-destructively, I guess, nervous and defensive, and not. Wasn't a good boyfriend at all. I was jealous. And it was, and that's where this idea came to me. Like, you shouldn't be afraid to let your girlfriend, in my case, dance with somebody else at the party. It's like, what kind of lame mindset does it take to not let that happen? And somehow that creeps into how we work in firms, and it creates this expanded survey, this Chinese menu that you're talking about, because we don't want our clients going somewhere else. So we manufacture our ability to do something because we're afraid they're going to fall in love with somebody else. And
Yeah.
so, yes, I think the way you phrased it is exactly right. It's this settled sense inside us that we're not really sure that we're that irreplaceable. And so we don't dare let our clients experiment with that.
Yeah, yeah. I just had a client recently that went through something similar, and their way of dealing with it was to make sure that they had some type of say in placing a new marketing director at the client, the client's place. And what ended up happening was they got passed over for a much larger development project, which was not in their wheelhouse at all. And now they're very nervous that, of course, the fox is in the hen house.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. So let's go into something else. In the book, you talk about, obviously this whole thing about expertise, the ultimate control that stems from withholding the expertise, but that it's only meaningful if your agency is actually difficult to replace. So what are your thoughts on ad agencies that have to pitch big brands with creative concepts or campaigns?
Where they're doing that for free before they're engaged?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that in some cases, I think they just feel like it never occurs to them that they have an option. They've just come to believe that this is how the game is played, and so they respond to the cattle call, and they show up and they do their thing, and then they beg to be chosen. And it's a really lame. It's sort of like somebody who's not good at sports hoping to get chosen for the softball team or something. It's just it's dehumanizing, and the reason that these clients can do this to agencies is because they can, right? Blair Enns talks about that all the time.
Yeah.
They do is because they can, and we let them continue getting away with it. He's also done some interesting research that says that your chances of landing those accounts in a cattle call setting are directly related to the degree to which you disrupt the process. So if you follow all the rules, you are very unlikely to win that work. So
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so you have to say like, oh, okay, you have to spend extra time with me, or you have to tell me who else is pitching, or you need to give me another week, or whatever it is. If you don't disrupt the process, your chances are almost they make it not even worth participating. So the reason these agencies do it is because they are largely interchangeable, and they also, and it's much more difficult for them to make changes to that. They may even recognize intellectually that they have a problem with positioning, but very few of them have the power to make those changes at the institutional level because they're often a part of a holding company or whatever. They also misunderstand positioning because those agencies, their primary value to their clients is the fact that they are large enough to have a deep enough bench to be entrusted with a large project. Smaller firms, the ones that you and I typically work with, don't have that luxury, and so positioning for them is even more important, and they can't lean on that. But the truth is, most agencies are not positioned well, and
Right.
most agencies are doing, I guess, average from a financial standpoint. Those aren't the people I work with. I work with people who, and you do too, I'm sure, who want to be exceptional. They want to have a little bit more power in the marketplace, not to beat clients over the head, but to make more money so that they stay interested in this silly business, and so that they do better work for their clients and can sleep at night.
Yeah. Do you think everything at the end of the day, if we really were to boil everything down, do you think it all comes down to positioning?
I do.
I do
Absolutely,
too.
I do.
Yeah.
Because without positioning, you don't know who your prospects are. You don't know where to find them. You don't know what to say to them when you find them, and on and on. You don't know what they want to buy from you. You don't even know who to hire to fulfill the promises you've made. So I
Yeah.
do think it all comes down to positioning.
Yeah,
Yes.
everyone wants to jump on profitability, but I think you can't even go there until you really get positioning nailed down.
Absolutely true. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the concept that's quite hard for agency owners to wrap their head around. And I'm glad you touched upon it in the book. As opportunities increase, agencies should be underbuilding their capacity and having more no conversations. Why do these people fight this tendency so much?
I think it comes from this cultural infusion we have. We have this genetic predisposition to say yes to growth. We feel like being a stable agency that is not adding or detracting from body count is making lots of money year over year. That's just not enough. It requires, to really be successful in our world, you have to be growing. You have to apply for the silly Inc. 5000 awards or something. That's and we if you think back on it, step back from our industry and you think about this world that we live in here in North America anyway, it's called the land of opportunity.
Right.
So if we say no to opportunity, it almost becomes unpatriotic, which is really silly. And so every time opportunity comes along, we say yes to opportunity, which means that we build out our capacity. And in the process, we're creating this larger and larger machine that we have to feed. And if we don't keep this delta, this difference between our opportunity and our capacity, then we just simply don't ever have the opportunity to say no. And I'm convinced that most bad business decisions come from financial panic. And so we, like, around our positioning, around people, around what we're going to do with a client, whatever that is. And so I want to make sure that there's a difference between those two, opportunity and capacity, so that people will have the comfort to say no. Now, most of the time that means you just say no to opportunity. Sometimes it means you have to dismiss staff because you don't have enough opportunity for the people that you have. That's the painful side of it.
Yeah. And when you say underbuild capacity, I'm assuming you mean you have a core team that's full-time employees, but then you can rely on an elastic team of contractors and things like
Right.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And those contractors should be more the skill people, not the folks managing projects and accounts and doing strategy. And if you work it that way, then it works beautifully. And there are so many fantastic contractors out there these days, a better pool than there ever has been. So it's quite feasible.
Yeah. So contract out your execution and your implementation stuff. Keep all the client relationships and everything else in-house. Grow that. At what point, though? So yes, you're underbuilding the capacity, having more no conversations, but let's say you have a couple of ideal opportunities. These are perfect opportunities for your niche, your fit, your core expertise. At what point does an agency owner say, okay, now we actually do have to increase capacity? How do you measure that, or how do you have that conversation with your clients?
Yeah, that is a fantastic question, and I can answer it for you, but we actually switch into another chapter here, because if, like you said, it's a perfect opportunity, we've looked at it carefully, objectively, there's no problems with it, then we have to ask ourselves as agency principals a different question, and that's this: do I want to step further away from the work and closer to managing people? If I answer that in the affirmative, then growth makes really good sense. But if somebody isn't willing as they grow to step towards people and away from doing, then it's a mistake to grow. So I think, to me, growth is not bad or good. It's very neutral. It's about what you personally want to do. So I think it's fine. It's actually a really good idea to grow if you're answering all those questions right.
Right, but it's about putting that checklist in place and really doing some soul searching to see what you want.
Right. Yeah, because, I mean, is there any connection between firms that are thriving and their creativity or their intelligence? There's very little. The connection is between thriving and the quality of their business decisions around positioning, around people, around services, all those things. And so that's the work that you and I and other people do. We try to help them think through those business decisions that they're making.
Right. Well, for everyone listening, if you have not ordered a copy of The Business of Expertise, go over to expertise.is. David's got a ton of other resources on that site as well, and I will obviously post everything in the show notes. David, thank you so much for your time. This was really, really fun.
Oh, Kelly, it was great. Really enjoyed chatting with you, and thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I appreciate it.
Thank you. This episode has been brought to you by Workamajig, the #1 creative agency management software. Show notes at thrive.workamajig.com. Find out how your creative agency can become more productive and more profitable. Schedule your demo at thrive.workamajig.com.